How'd you hear about the project initially?
How did I hear about this project? I got the script, but I was immediately told there was no possibility of it happening because it was already cast and the director didn't want anything to do with it. That's the first thing I heard. But then I always know that with these projects, things change and directors change and actors end up not doing it and something happens, and I read it and I was completely mesmerised by it and the story, Latif's story, so I immediately read the book, and then I just kept hounding people about what was happening with it. And I remember a big gap happening and then just making a phone call going, whatever happened to that, the sort of doubly script where he plays both thingy bobs? And my agent went, I'll check out, I'll find out what's happening. And suddenly it was available again. And I went, oh yeah, well, we'll try and sort a meeting out. And I got in a room with Lee Tamahori to discuss it and do some scenes from it. And we just were both very in similar mindsets about how we perceived it and saw it and how we thought these characters should be portrayed. And then Guy found out a few weeks later that I would be doing it. So it was something that I feel like I did chase or kept looking out for because it was like nothing else I'd ever read.
Did you actually speak to Latif?
Yeah, I spoke to Latif for quite a while when we first took the project on. Myself, him and Lee sat down in London for a while, but we had kind of discussed already, myself and Lee, that and both agreed that it was almost still too much in the recent past, the events, and therefore, and who knows what is true and what's not true, who knows who these people really were and what they said, the regime is long gone. And so for us, I think it was more about taking this incredible story, this idea, and then having rather a lot of dramatic license and changing it into what we needed it to be to make it entertaining and exciting and exhilarating for an audience. So it was incredible sitting down with Latif and just hearing any detail or any aspect of the things that he went through. But at the same time, during that meeting with Lee, we decided that we would take this and create what we wanted to with it, and that gave us much more freedom. And then, because otherwise I would go and study Latif, and he would have been fine with that and sat with him for hours and hours, sort of learning his every movement and asking him questions which, quite frankly, I didn't feel I had the right to pry about.
Well, he did write a book. Why wouldn't you feel like you could pry about him?
Well, there were other yes, that stuff's fine, the stuff that we already knew, but if I wanted to do an accurate, detailed biographical account of his life, then I'd need to know much more and want to know much more in quite a detailed way, and I didn't think that was necessary. I thought that whatever we had there as a story, we could then work from, and we needed to separate these two people in a huge way. Like I think that was the most important thing that both myself and Lee discussed.
You have to get into a character that is going into one of the most oppressive regimes, who's been tortured, who knows that at any moment you can be killed. What is a day in the life with your character as Latif?
Well, it was often never just with one, it was always with both, and it was normally having done some rehearsals and finding out what would work best, was to often be a day at the beginning of the day. So I'd experience his manic, psychotic behaviour first, and then I'd step into the shoes of Latif, and it always felt like as a voyeur of this madman and this situation which you had no opportunity to get yourself out of. So what I always found sort of intriguing, what I tried to sort of talk to Latif about, was how much that character, who is ultimately a good man, a military man and a stoic man, how much was he affected by this? How much did he have to involve himself in? It was just like, it felt to me when I stepped into, or looked through his eyes, it was just utterly painful. It was everything that you were surrounded by, you tried your hardest to fight against, but ultimately you had no control of it. and then the ability one has to actually give in to these situations and become something we're not. I've really enjoyed, in terms of acting, playing the third character, I always saw it as, which was Latif mimicking or trying his utmost for his life's sake to be Uday. And he's not an actor, he was never told how to impersonate or how to become another human being, but he had to, again, and he was forced into this. So it's all these people in this film are sort of pretending to be who they're not. No one's honest about who they are. And it was, I have to admit, it was sort of more rewarding. It felt so anyway while we were doing it, although exhausting, but to play Uday.
Because of the manic nature of the character?
Yeah, I think because there were no limits. It wasn't contained. It was just, you took a deep breath and you just went for it. It didn't matter whether you were getting lines right, because you were already sort of in the mode and in that moment, and so anything, you'd react and respond to anything that was happening around you. It was kind of, it was like a sort of trance-like state.
To be able to associate with Uday as Latif, was there anything that you used to try and find that would be likable in Uday, or what was the motivation for that in any way to try and?
Yeah, one of my big questions and worries at the beginning was, this man is just utterly despisable, and I couldn't find anything within this man that I admired or liked or could. He had no moral code whatsoever, and he did what he pleased to anyone, and he didn't think twice about anything. It was utterly disturbing, and I always asked Lee, how there's always a certain amount of yourself that you want to bring to one of these characters. You're looking through your own eyes, although you're looking for it's you. You need something to cling on to, or something that you feel compassion towards, or something that you like to give it an inner life, or a smile, or a body. And I've just kind of, the more I've read and the more I've researched, the more revolted I was by him. And the only thing I could really cling on to try and understand in any way of whether he had any humanity in him whatsoever was his love of his mother, his care of his mother, I suppose what he was experienced and exposed to as a child from his father, which we know there was scenes of torture that his father made him sit through and watch. So you start to understand from a Freudian point of view that his psyche in a way, and sons of dictators are always, I think, quite interesting human beings. They're this all-powerful figure in your life who never really paid him any heed or respect, and wouldn't ever allow him or give him any military capabilities, and wasn't letting him take over his reign of power. I think he deep down he knew that.
What was I apologize? What was the day on the film where you were so exhausted because of something that you had to portray as Uday, versus a day of elation when you were portraying Latif? What was the difference? Just in terms of I speak to a lot of actors, and some of them can just go, okay, I'm on, I'm off, I'm on and off. It doesn't sound like you can be on and off. It sounds to me like you are actually quite disturbed by playing Uday. That it actually, there's a lot to it that goes on in your psyche, and you have to wash that out of your system. Was there a day where you just were shooting something and you were just like, wow, I am so disturbed by this day?
There were certain points, there were scenes when I couldn't. I was so disgusted by it and what it was, and knowing that these things had happened. And I mean, the scene where they approached the wedding party and seeing a newly wed, and the happiness within that environment, and his sadistic enjoyment of knowing that he's about to corrupt and destroy this happiness, and then seeing what happens to the girl after that, and those, and then to be able to just be so nonchalant in his response about it. They were difficult. Those scenes were difficult, I think, but they were the hard ones. But
that's what makes this movie so compelling. I mean, it's watchable because of that. Because you have to. I mean, the depth of your performance is what's going to make it.
But that's always what's in kind of invigorating for you as an actor. If you have something to work with that has that many levels, then it's, even though it's exhausting, you're kind of enriched and enlivened by it, really, because so often you're dealing with the opposite and you're trying your utmost to give something life that doesn't have it. This had an extraordinary amount of different layers and human ideas, and it's something that we identify with in terms of, we know the history of it. We always knew, I knew very little about the family, really. I always remember hearing about Uday. Oh, I always remember hearing, it'd be bad if we get rid of Saddam because the guy who will take over is even worse. That's all my knowledge really was. And other people's, I think, is similar. Oh, what, the guy with all the cars, you know, it's that. So to bring them to life, and to, what was hard is knowing the destructive nature of them and the effect that they had on so many, the horrifying effect they had on so many people's lives and so many people that were around us that were affected by them. Yeah, monstrous, but for me, and it's hard to say, oh, I had such a wonderful time filming it, you know, because portraying, you know, it's a gangster, they're nasty gangsters, and they existed. But I found it one of the most creative, enriching experiences I've ever had acting. So.
Well, that's great. What was your favourite day on the film?
Favourite day? I don't know. Do you know what? Each one was a kind of little nugget of. It was so different, and Lee was so energetic and enthused about the whole thing, and he was. I just loved working with him because he didn't let you. His energy was such that if you for a moment sagged, or thought, oh, I can't do it anymore, you'd feel so guilty because he had so much on his plate. And so every day it was a discussion, it was a conversation about how we're going to make this better, how we're going to change this, is this going to work? The technicalities of the scene were quite complicated for such a small film. We were all pitching in, all our ideas were coming together, and you try and work out, how are we going to double up this scene? How do you want another actor to be in the play? No, let's try and do it another way. Play the sound back of that last take, and making spontaneous decisions about which take was going to be the master take in the space in the day, because once that was set, that was the one we had to work around. That's terrifying for a director to make that decision there and then, and for me to know which one is being used and is going to be the final outcome. But so each day brought up new problems, but in the same way. It was just, I just adored every moment of it, because I felt I had some creative input into it, which you rarely feel on a film set.